Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Do Good to Lead Well Through Crisis webinar series. My name is Craig Dowden, and absolutely thrilled that you took the time out of this Thursday morning to join us, and very excited about this upcoming conversation. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back, a warm welcome back. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, a warm welcome to you as well. Really excited that you were able to participate in this, and looking forward to a really engaging conversation today. The purpose of this webinar series, so before the launch of my first book, Do Good to Lead Well, The Science and Practice of Positive Leadership, I've had the profound privilege to speak with top CEOs, best-selling authors, TED speakers, and wanted to be able to share those insights with a broader audience and spark a larger conversation. And then during the pandemic, during COVID-19, a lot of CEOs and organizations I've been speaking and working with were saying, so what do we do? How do we lead during this time of profound disruption? And so launched this series really to continue that conversation. And so I've had the privilege over the last couple of years to speak with over 60 top CEOs, best-selling authors, TED speakers like Alim. And so I'm absolutely thrilled that you'll have a chance to hear from him this morning. You may notice, so it's an exciting moment for me. You'll see the latest version of the book cover for my upcoming book, A Time to Lead. So if you've been on the webinar before, you'll see this is an updated book cover design. So very happy to share that this morning, and before we jump into the conversation. So my guest today, and absolutely, as I said, I've been looking forward to this, so happy that Alim was able to find time in his schedule to speak with us. So he's a serial entrepreneur and business leader with a focus on helping organizations digitally transform their businesses. He founded Infusion, an award-winning technology and design solutions provider with over 700 employees worldwide, bringing digital innovation to Fortune 500 clients, which was later sold and integrated successfully to Avanade, a joint venture between Accenture and Microsoft. He's one of Canada's top 40 under 40 award recipients. He combines his passion for building cultures with a growth-oriented mindset and challenging the established status quo. So really excited to talk to him about that, to create positive change for his clients. He's currently the managing director of Hatch Digital, and this morning there have been some challenges in terms of the video side, so you'll only see me on camera this morning. So Alim, welcome to the program. Really fabulous to have you with us today.
Thank you, Craig. And I would say I am sorry that we're not live from a video perspective, but people at home can picture that photo of me just aged about 10 years, and you'll have a good idea of what I look like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, and we'll leave that up for our conversation. And again, really thrilled that you're here. One point, Alim has kindly agreed to take questions from the live audience. So if you have any questions for him, jump in. This is a great opportunity to speak with one of Canada's top business leaders and has global experience and insights. So absolutely, please take full advantage of this opportunity. So one of the things I wanted to start with you about, Alim, is you onboarded into this role during the pandemic. I believe it was July, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd love to hear your experience in terms of what that was like for you taking on this new role.
Sure, and maybe it might be worth, let me give you a little bit of the lead up, you
Sure.
know, because I think like everyone, COVID upended our lives, and so I had, as you mentioned, I had built a company that I'm very proud of with some great partners and colleagues, and we sold the business in 2017 to Avanade, and I spent 3 years with Avanade. It was a fantastic journey, and in February 2020, I made the decision to leave, and I made the decision to accept the role at Hatch. And one of my actually, I shouldn't say one of my conditions, probably my only condition when I decided to accept the role at Hatch was I said, look, I need to take a little bit of time off. You know, it's been we spent 16, 17 years building the business, kind of rolled right into the integration. It's been fantastic, but I want to just take a little bit of time and rest and recover and everything. And so during those 4 months, I had planned, trips around the world. I planned to, I think my wife and I were going to go to Israel. We had a family trip planned to Italy. I was going to go visit friends in New York. We were supposed to, go on a great March break trip to Jamaica. It was going to be travel filled, adventure filled, and everything. And literally my first day off of work was the first day of the lockdown. It was March 16th. And
Wow.
so I actually ended up spending, the next 4 months at home, which was not a bad thing. It was actually probably one of those silver linings of the pandemic. And yeah, I started at Hatch on July 6th, which was, of course, people weren't in the office. So I had a team that I'd never met in person. I wasn't able to visit clients. And for me, switching to Hatch, one of the reasons I made the switch, and I'm sure this is one of the themes we'll talk about, is there was some tremendous opportunity, but it was also a very uncomfortable role for me. So there was an opportunity for me to use a lot of my strengths and experience, but it was in a domain that I wasn't used to. There was a steep learning curve for me to ramp up, and so it was difficult. Hatch is a fantastic company. Everybody was really friendly, but I would probably say for the first 18 months, I enjoyed it, but and it's only now in retrospect that I can kind of share this. Now that things are open and I've met clients and I've traveled and I've met the team and we've done those in-person things, it felt very much like a two-dimensional experience rather than a three-dimensional experience. So when people ask me as I was going through it, they're like, "How is it?" I'd say, "Oh, it's fine. It's going well." Now that we've kind of, I don't want to say totally come out of the other end of it, but things look a lot more like normal than they did, during most of the pandemic. It was definitely one of the biggest career challenges for me.
Well, and thank you for sharing that. And yes, quite the origin story, if you will, in terms of the first day of the pandemic and having the plans, and as you say, ultimately upended. I also have a question right away, so which is great. I love that about this. So thank you for that. Jennifer was wondering, really, if could you share more about? You mentioned how it was outside of your realm, your comfort
Yeah.
zone. So would love to hear a little bit about what was it like? How did you walk through that process? How
Yeah.
were you able to, despite the fear, lean in and do it anyway?
Well, I think first it's about mindset. So one of the things I learned, so the company the Infusion, the company that I grew and led, we did a lot of digital professional services in markets like financial services, in retail, in hospitality. We did work for some very large companies in the space. We punched above our weight, but it was a digital company. We had software developers, digital designers, and one of the things that I, in hindsight, really enjoyed about the journey, and maybe it's what makes me an entrepreneur, it's that when we built the company, I'd never done it before. None of our team had. We were fresh out of school. Every stage we were at was a tremendous learning experience. We were always doing things that we had never done before, so we were figuring things out. We were constantly uncomfortable. And quite frankly, there were periods over the years where we got comfortable. Those tended to be the years in hindsight that we didn't do as well, that we had more challenges. So when we sold the business to Avanade, I very much went in with a mindset saying, I'm not going to be one of those traditional, CEOs or presidents that get acquired and spend my time with my arms crossed saying how much I hate the new organization because, oh my gosh, they're like this, they're like that. I actually had the opposite. I said, I'm running a $100 million company. This is a $3 billion company that's owned by a $40 billion company. Wow, I'm going to treat this as a growth and a learning opportunity. And so when I came into Avanade and I spent those 3 years integrating two businesses, tremendous, steep learning curve for me. As I adapted into the Avanade business. I was running their North American sales and helping drive their global sales strategy. Wow, it was, orders of magnitude over what I had done. It taught me to use different muscles. And what I found was I was still enjoying myself at Avanade, but the slope of the growth curve for me was starting to was starting to look less exponential and more linear. And I wasn't really looking for new things, and I got a call from a recruiter about Hatch. And in some ways, Hatch couldn't have been more different than what I'd done. It was a company of engineers, engineering and design, and of more traditional type work. Hatch is one of the leading companies in the world in the mining metal space. Hatch designs large infrastructure projects. Hatch works on large energy projects. Very different. The digital footprint was different, and the vision that was shared with me was they had a desire to take the knowledge they had and the credibility they had in the industry and codify that into IP and build a portfolio of digital products that could be licensable in the market. And so tremendously interesting. So where it made me feel comfortable, I felt comfortable recruiting talent. I felt comfortable as a business leader. I felt comfortable, in terms of building products. But understanding the domain and being in the mining space, working with engineers, working in a business where I would be leading something that was fundamentally different than the rest of the business from a business model perspective, that I'd be running a smaller part of the business, that made me feel very uncomfortable. And so when I had that time selling the business, really reflecting what jazzes me, what makes me excited, and not on a day-to-day basis. Being uncomfortable is never comfortable. But when I look back and what gives me the greatest satisfaction, it's actually finding order in that discomfort and driving things forward. And so that's a long preamble to answer the question. What did I do? I think it's a mindset. I think it's recognizing and saying, I'm uncomfortable. That's okay. I'm not. No one that hired me thought I was a mining expert. They were open. So understanding I can go and ask questions, and spending time and saying, not what I know, what are the questions that I have? And having a little bit of the confidence to go and be genuinely curious, and genuinely vulnerable to ask for help and support. I think that's the foundational piece to starting. And then also just having the confidence in why you were hired, or what your strengths are that you really bring to the table, and grounding yourself in that.
Well, and I love so many pieces, and when we first connected and I wrote a financial post back when I was writing for the Post, a profile about you and your journey. And one of the things that struck me, Alim, was around, to borrow from Google, that intellectual humility. So despite all the amazing things that were being accomplished, also saying, hey, I want to grow, I want to develop, I want to try new adventures and really stretch myself. So I think that's just such an inspiring and insightful element for all of us in terms of thinking about our own lives personally and professionally. And not surprising, I have an additional question about, so love that growth oriented mindset. So a couple of things, like, was this something you were born with, or what advice would you have for people around how they could build it themselves, or how they can inspire it in other people? So I think that's great.
I wish I could tell you that what I just shared with you and that mindset was something that I was born with, because that would have certainly that would certainly have been a less stressful journey. To be honest, some of it, it was learned by failure. To be honest, we used to have a saying at Infusion, that which makes you good keeps you from being great. And when we started Infusion, we had this attitude. You have to keep in mind, we were we were a group of early 20-somethings, and we were tackling, we were going after Wall Street clients, and we wanted to do impactful work and build trading systems on Wall Street. And we had this mindset, which was, attitude and aptitude trump experience. And we also had this swagger in how we behaved and we conducted ourselves. We thought or believed that we were the smartest guys and gals in the room, that we had better ideas, that we had the answers, that we could outwork everybody, and that served us really, really well. Until until it didn't. And I remember, you know, that was, we all had the mindset in our business, myself included, that, you know, when you enter a meeting, you got to be the smartest guy or gal in the room. You've got to have the answers. You've got to be, you know, you've got to be all over, you know, everything. And we went through a period, and so, you know, like I said, that served us well in the early days. But like anything else, there's a bad side to any good. There's always a bad. And we came to this period around 2015. We'd just gone through tremendous growth, tremendous growth. And I want to say, you know, in hindsight, I don't think we recognized at the time, it made us a little bit arrogant. It made us a little bit fat and happy. And we then went through a period where we actually went through, you know, businesses go through ups and downs. We went through a little bit of a downturn. We'd closed some very large deals. And as those deals started winding up, we didn't have the full replacement work. And it felt a little bit like, you know, the wheels were coming off the bus. And we did turn it around, but it took us 18 months to turn it around instead of, you know, probably 6 months that it probably should have. And it was a period of self-reflection for me. And what I realized was I had the wrong mindset, that in that mindset, there was some arrogance, there was, and instead of, I switched and said, you know what, instead of trying to be the smartest person in the room with all the answers, maybe the right approach is to be the person with the best questions. And are we great attitude and aptitude, but, you know, there's other people that have, you know, we were approaching $100 million company. There's other people that have done this before. Are there other people whose ideas we can tap into? Not everything has to be homebrew. Are there things that we hold deep, as deep convictions that we could be wrong about? And that's scary, actually, to think about that, right? Because you sometimes build your identity and who you are on your convictions, and being able to say, maybe I'm wrong. And it was through that, you know, that exploration that we were able to start finding some answers and some, you know, and for me, some different leadership style, you know, approaches. And for me, it came just in time. I think had I gone into Avanade, not having gone through that, I think I would have been, I don't think the acquisition and the integration would have gone nearly as well. I don't think I would have experienced the success and growth that I did at Avanade. And I don't think I would have been able to come into an organization like Hatch and be an agent of change.
Well, and I love that, and my own admitted my own bias as well, Alim, in terms of, I love that where you talk about not, you know, expanding beyond having the right answer, being the smartest person in the room, really asking, so how can I ask the highest quality questions? How can I extract the best quality information and learn from the experiences of others? So I think that's just absolutely awesome, and it's such powerful insight for all of us in terms of, well, how, and I also love the fact that you commented on how we build our egos or attach our egos to that quote unquote being right, quote unquote being smart. So that, and it's really awesome how that then translated into amazing, not just personal and professional results, like business bottom line impacts for you. So what was that like to see that, I guess, come to fruition? Were you surprised at how much of a delta it had in terms of having that impact? I'd love to hear a little more about that journey.
You know, I would say this, it absolutely had a business impact. The bigger, I would say the bigger impact for me was seeing the impact it had on the team and being able to get better scale out of the leaders around me, and seeing them be a lot more empowered. We always had a culture at Infusion about empowerment, and we lived that, but it almost unleashed a different level of growth among our people. So, you know, instead of going in to a meeting that might be difficult where someone's bringing a problem and going and saying, okay, you know, I think you need to do A, B, C, and D, instead going and asking questions to learn about it, and then asking broad open-ended questions, you just get better ideas. And, you know, whether it's your idea that ends up being followed or the person's idea, or you form it together, yes, you get better results, but it almost adds a whole extra dimension, or an extra, you know, exponent on the growth that you can experience. But you start seeing leaders really thrive.
Well, that's absolutely awesome. And what I love about what you just shared is it transcends the personal benefit. And I love how you talk about it. And it's such a rich point about, hey, we're now enabling others to unlock their potential. We're diversifying and broadening our perspective on things, which can then, exactly as you say, drive better quality ideas and the pace of change in the world. And so much information, I mean, almost information overflow. It's a great opportunity for us to be able to crowdsource amazing ideas and innovation. I absolutely love that. So I've got another question here from Stan, who really appreciated, and this builds beautifully on our conversation, Alim, which is just, he really appreciated your focus on building cultures with a growth-oriented mindset. So, you know, have started to touch on that and really given some great insight. Can you expand a little bit more around how you have a passion for that, and how do you do that? Because that's a big question I get asked all the time. Like, how do you build a growth-oriented culture, especially in a world that is, for now, you know, continuing to be highly remote in some corners?
I think I think there's a few core components. One, I think it's a leader's job to define values, right? And I think when you're choosing the values of the organization that you're creating, or the mission that you're undertaking, or the group that you're driving, you need to be, as a leader, very deliberate about what are our values, and some of those should tie to growth. Some of those should tie, you know, hopefully some of those tie to integrity. Hopefully some of those tie to other things. I know in the organizations that I've built, or even the organizations I've joined, it's one of the reasons we joined Hatch. Hatch has deep core values around innovation. That's something that we've adopted in digital. It has deep core values around employee empowerment. It has deep core values around tackling tough challenges and out of the box approaches. So I think the first thing you have to do is sit down and say, what are the values? And the values then serve as the basis for behavior. So culture, in my mind, you know, values are immutable. You don't negotiate on values with anybody, and they don't change over time. Culture, to me, are the behaviors that you do over and over and over again to bring those values to life. So if you've defined your vision, if you've defined your values, the next thing is you've got to now do this with the team. You sit down and you share those values, and you sit down and say, what's the vision? What are we as a group going to accomplish? And if some of those values, so one of the things we have in our digital business is we've taken Hatch as a very strong manifesto-driven culture. We've taken that and said, okay, what does that mean to us in digital? And one of the values we have right now is unbounded thinking, and being bold. And so we now sit down and say, okay, this is the task or the mandate from the board, or what we're trying to do. How do we translate that into a vision? And you do that, and you craft that with the team, and you use the values to challenge. You know, are we being true to that? And once you've done those two things, you can then sit down and say, okay, guys, how do we make this real, right? And the reality is what starts creating your culture. So what are the behaviors we're going to do to bring the values to life and bring the vision to life? And what are the disciplined things we're going to do over and over again? And that begins to create, you know, that growth culture. The final thing I'll say that I probably should have said from the outset is it's very important that when you're hiring and when you're building your team, you're building people where your values resonate with them, because that's what they're going to live day to day. So it is, you know, you need to find people, diverse backgrounds, different levels of experience, but the values have to resonate with them. They have to be willing to, you know, to embrace them. That needs to be immutable. But values that set by the leader, right people on the bus that believe in the values, defining a vision that lives to those values with your team, and then defining as a team what are the behaviors we're going to do over and over again to bring that vision to life.
Well, awesome. I've got so many comments. Thank you. Awesome answer and awesome insight. For me, I love the progression and how you laid it out thoughtfully and specifically about, well, let's start with values, then let's move to vision, and now let's talk about, so then how do we bring all of that to life in terms of expected behaviors? And I think that's such an incredible roadmap for each of us to think about. And I love how you describe that values are essential. They're non-negotiable. They are at the core of everything that we do. So I just think that is so fantastically powerful on that. And I have another question. So Tara said, congratulations on all of your success. Sounds like you're an amazing leader, executive, and so wonderful hearing from you. Love the point on value. So any tips or techniques around how you can create those values most effectively? So love the idea, and how do you almost take a step back and set the stage so you can create them as a team or as an executive?
Well, I do think it's important that you don't the values need to be defined by the leader of the business. And if you're building a business within a business, they need to align with the overall corporate values, right? So that's actually a first important point. If you're in a business that says we value slow, steady growth and predictability, and you say, hey, we've got this department, we value risk taking, innovation and disruptiveness, you might have a challenge, and everything. So the first thing to look to if you're within an organization is, what are the values of the organization? One, do they resonate with me personally? Then from there, or if you're starting your own business, I think the values that you put on the table, they have to be authentically yours. There's values that are popular to adapt, but there's no magical winning formula. I don't think it's about Googling Google or Googling Netflix and saying, oh, they had these values, we're going to adopt the same ones. Businesses over time have had different value sets that have driven success. I think you have to really sit down and say, what do I hold deep in my conviction of what's important to me, and authentically, how do I work based on what I'm trying to do in the market? What are the values that I think are important to my stakeholders, right? So when I sit down, the values I have are the values that resonate with me, but they're also, who are the stakeholders? Who's the talent that I need to bring on board, right? How am I going to speak to the talent that I need? So it's what's valuable to me, what's valuable to the talent, what's valuable to the core organization that I'm a part of, and what are the values of my customers? And you sit down and you say, I need to build a set that engages me and is going to engage my stakeholders. And I would start with those things: introspection, and looking at the values of the stakeholders you need to engage, and what's gonna resonate with them.
Well, and it sounds like one of the key stakeholders that you have is your team, your senior leadership team. So, and there was a question from Tim relating to that. So, love the comment about the focus on values and how the values are. It's essential for them to be authentic. So, how do you bring in the values of your team members, shall we say, into that equation, and how do you go about weighing them? So, I think such a fabulous conversation we're having, Alim.
I think, so it depends where you are as an organization. So as a founder, or a group of founders, let's say there's 2 or 3 founders, you would define those values together as founders, and then
Right.
you're looking for talent in the market that that will line up to those values. Now, I'm going to contradict a little bit of what I said. I said values are immutable, and they are, but over a long arc they can evaluate. Certain ones can change, or you may add certain ones. So I'll give you an example. It would be very hard to build a business today selling in a North American context, to not have diversity as one of your core values. Aside from it being the right thing to do, and hopefully people hold that personally, there's companies with long heritages that maybe didn't always have diversity as a core value. But you're probably not going to be able to recruit the best talent. You're probably not going to have clients that are gonna buy from you if that's not one of your core values. So as leaders in the business, it is time to sit down to say, okay, are the values that I hold still true to me? Are the values that I hold still relevant to my stakeholders? And are there new things that I need to adapt? But that's not a daily thing. That's that's over a long arc.
Well, I love that point because, as you say, I mean, things shift and organizations mature, different, the context changes, and I think that's a wonderful point around. These are core foundational elements, and yet at the same time, we can grow, we can change, and that's a natural part of human behavior, both in our own personal lives as well as in an organization within a business. And I think being thoughtful around that and thinking about, so what are the things that we're doing and how we're doing them, just fantastic. I've got another question from Rich, who said, thank you for commenting on the importance of hiring for values fit. Any suggestions? So how do you go about, are you able to share, Alim, any strategies you use to figure out whether or not, Craig Dowden is a good fit for Hatch Digital from a value standpoint?
Yeah, I normally spend time before. I purposely don't have a sheet that I just pull in. I actually sit down every, most times that I'm conducting an interview, and I actually stare at our values ahead of time, and I actually do two things. I jot down functionally, like, hey, what's important for this person to be able to, what are the 3 or 4 things that I'm evaluating this person black and white from a skills or experience point of view. And then I actually then sit down and look at the values that we have, and I try to I try to then take that and say, what are the behaviors that I would want to see exhibited while I evaluate this person against the criteria. What would be, and I try to then ask, it's a little bit of a matrix, right? Do they have the abilities to do the job, but what are the behaviors that they've shown in the context of doing that job that line up?
Well, and thank you for that. Just received lots of comments. Great answer, great answer, great insight. And I really appreciate, this is a thread that I'm really taking from our discussion, Alim, and why I was really excited for us to have this conversation today. I love your emphasis on, okay, so how do we operationalize this? I love how you're talking about, because values are essential, they're absolutely critical. And then sometimes I think in conversations that I have or discussions with others, it's kind of, sometimes it can be seen as this abstract, like, okay, I know it's important, and then, so what does that look like? And I really appreciate how throughout the discussion we've had so far is that it almost sounds very intentional on your part. Am I off on that in terms of, like, okay, what does this look like?
I think as a leader in an organization, when you start driving scale, you're propagating your values. You do that through culture. It needs to be very deliberate, and that's one. It's a key to actually driving an organization at scale. Because when you're small and you're 5, 10, 15 people sitting in an office or sitting around the table, you can speak, you don't even have to always explicitly speak to your values. You're part of decisions together, you're brainstorming together. It's fairly tight. You're bringing it to life as a leader every single day, and everybody's kind of experiencing that, and it can become, in a good way, a little bit of an echo chamber. When you've got an organization that's around the world and leaders that are empowered, and you're not a part of that, you need to take deliberate steps to make sure to make sure that that it propagates, and that's how you make sure that you're growing a business that's consistent with your strategy and who you are.
Well, I love that, and I wonder if, again, you think about and you hear about sometimes cultures that can go off the rails, if you will, or organizations that start out strong and then can really encounter some profound difficulties. And it's what you just shared triggered within me. It's, as you say, when you're smaller and you're growing, you're almost naturally a part of the ongoing conversation. Then as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, as the scale grows, then you can get further and further removed from the value, the epicenter of the values, and then what can happen in the implementation. So I love how, kind of an important point as we grow is that, all right, so we need to be mindful of that implementation, and what our values are going to continue to look like, no matter where we are in the world, no matter what area of the business we're in the world. So really powerful reminder, because I can imagine for some leaders and founders, it's that, oh, well, they just get used to this kind of thing and maybe assume, well, it's going to roll out the way that it originally happened. And I guess with the Undercover Boss TV show, you know, what starts out as X can transform into a very different animal.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I got another question from Allison, who says, you seem like a very thoughtful leader, executive, and so would love to get your take. We are in this area of disruption. Someone I spoke with called it the age of permanent impermanency, I think, which is a really great way to look at it. What are your thoughts about leadership, and what are some key skills, attributes for leaders today, and what's going to continue to be important into the future? So maybe taking on a crystal ball of leadership now and into the future. What do leaders need to do?
Geez, I think I don't know if I'll be able to give you a comprehensive answer. I'll share some thoughts that popped into my head as you're asking the question. I think the first and foremost, leaders need to genuinely be curious. And I think that's really, really important. We are in an age of disruption, but I do have to say this, whether I feel like, you know, I graduated in 2001, right during the, kind of .com. I feel like we've been in my whole career, we've been living through an age of disruption. Now, maybe we were living in an age of disruption the 20 years before that, but it does feel like that disruption is constant. You look at where we were 20 years ago to where we are now. I think there's another phase of disruption going on right now in terms of electrification, the real world concerns about climate change, the changes in supply chain. But I think it's been going for a while, and I think the leaders that have been most successful have been curious, and curiosity leads you to ask questions, and it allows you to challenge your own assumptions. So I think that's one. And curiosity, figuring out how you scratch that curiosity, it's reading different points of view, learning about different industries, meeting people, asking questions, challenging your own assumptions. So I think that's a core characteristic that's important. I think being able to connect with employees and being, I know this is overused, but being empathetic. So for the most part, the industries that, at least that I've worked in, are very human capital intensive, industries. I've never been a part of a business, even during a down cycle, where every employee that has worked for me couldn't walk out the door and have 5 different job offers paying them X% more. And so the areas that I've worked in, like digital or even the areas of Hatch, people are in high demand. So how do you connect with those people? How do you form a tribe? How do you tap into their growth desires? I think that's hugely important. And then I think another important term that if I look at the past 22 years of my career, resilience. If I plot on a major chart some of the big world events, 9/11 happened very early in my company's history, and we literally, thankfully, Lehman Brothers was our big client at the time, and we had consultants in the World Trade Center, and we literally saw our primary client that was 75-80% of our revenue at the time, because we were small and starting, we saw their office blow up. Wow. That, putting aside the, going through the human ramifications of that, how do you succeed and thrive as a business? That takes resilience. 2006, 2007, 2008, we saw the world markets come to a standstill, and a massive, massive explosion and risk. The global economy almost ceased, right?
Right.
That resilience, COVID-19 right now, right? Think about that. I think we need to expect those events to happen, regularly.
Mm.
And I think, and so that resilience would be the third one. So if I had to say the three that came to mind: curiosity, empathy, and resilience.
Well, and thank you for sharing that, and fantastic attributes, qualities, and love. I mean, what's interesting, and I've got a couple of follow-up questions, not surprisingly, and really enjoying your insights on this, Alim. The curiosity, it almost reminds, or it does remind me of, there's just been such a shift in terms of, I mean, when you look at top international thought leaders, when books like Adam Grant, so out of Wharton, what's his
Yep.
latest book? Think Again.
Yep.
Ed Hess out of Dowden, one of his latest bestsellers, Humility is the New Smart. That focus on curiosity and its role to being successful. And I love how it's linked to your second quality of empathy, which is okay. Well, a great way to build our empathy is to be curious and ask questions about someone else's situation and what's important to them, as you say. So I had a question about the curiosity. So Glenn said, love that you comment on curiosity. It seems like in this world, people are obsessed with being the loudest and pounding the table and making declarative statements. So any thoughts, guidance around, how that fits? So love it, and then also is, how to reconcile where we are.
I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I want to preface this next comment with, I am absolutely not a Trump supporter. So and I'll caveat that. But one of the things that's always bothered me, in this world, and increasingly over the past 10, 15, 20 years, is narratives become very black and white. And I think we have to extend that curiosity to things we hold dear. So, being a Canadian, fairly left-leaning, and doing a lot of business in the US, it really bothered me that people would say, this was, I remember it shocked me and it revealed a blind spot. I was in New York when Trump was first elected. And I almost didn't watch the election because I was like, oh, there's no way he's going to be elected. It's for sure, it's for sure going to be Hillary. And then as progressively the night rolled on, I was like, oh, it doesn't look like that's the case. And it was a moment for me afterwards where I said, oh my gosh, I have a massive blind spot. And I rejected the notion that I don't believe that 50% or whatever it is, 40, whatever, X number, 80 million people or whatever it is, can be crazy. I genuinely don't believe that. And there's a self-reflection that says, I need to understand this better. I need to understand, labeling things as black and white and saying, this is good, this is bad, these people are crazy. It's not productive. It's not, how are you going to have dialogue and engage and be productive, if you hold these things? And so I think you've got to actually step away, from the narrative. You've got to read the other points of view. You've got to try to understand where are they coming from, why do they believe this, where maybe there's some areas of where my views are wrong. And I think you've got to do it. And it's interesting, everybody's aware there's a horrible school, massacre in Texas a few weeks ago. I think it's equally important to read the coverage on Fox News as it is to read it on CNN. You don't have to agree with it, but as responsible citizens, we have to all do a better job to be curious, even when it makes us really, really uncomfortable.
It's been such a great conversation, and that point, that's to me, and wrote that down, being curious about things we hold dear. I think that's such an important place, because being curious in things that we're, comfortable with and we're happy and all that stuff, well, that's easy. Now when it's things we hold dear and holding up holding on to the idea, hey, I could be wrong on this, I might not be as fully informed. I just think that's so powerful and so essential. And it reminds me again, you nailed it around the black and white thinking or the either or thinking. And top decision making experts and researchers in the world say that's a sucker's choice. That's such a limiting
Yeah.
way in which to approach situations. And we must challenge ourselves to take a broader perspective. So I just love how what you're sharing, and also the lived experience and success that you've had in multiple organizations, high growth and high performance and highly engaged, that this translates. So thank you for sharing that. Really, really great. I've got another question as well from Tina around resilience. So love that you commented on resilience, and certainly that's something that is, we hear it all the time. So what do you do to keep yourself resilient, and how do you keep your executive team resilient?
I think there's, so one, I'm gonna share something that might sound a little bit spiritual. I actually think the meaning of life is experienced through resilience. So I I think if you take a step back, and if that's your view, it gives you a different view on things. If you're not experiencing challenges, if you're not, you know, experiencing discomfort, if you're happy all the time, if you're doing things that are easy for you, you're probably not going to have those moments of true satisfaction and accomplishment. You're probably not pushing yourself, hard enough. So if I don't have, a week at work or a month at work where I'm sitting back and saying, geez, can I really do this job? Or geez, I thought I had everybody on the same page, but they're really pushing back on me. Well, am I really affecting change? If every client opens their door and buys my product, am I charging enough for it? Am I pushing the envelope enough? So I think part of it is understanding that it is the meaning of what we're doing. It is that resilience, and so I think that's it's the we talked about what leaders need to be. That was one of my top 3 criteria. They need to be resilient, and that's part of the job. Now, how do you make teams resilient? I think it goes back to a few things. When you experience challenges, hopefully when you experience your first challenge or a difficult time, you've built a bank of time with your team, and there's trust and a good culture. That was actually one of the challenges of joining Hatch and Digital in the middle of a pandemic. Was I hadn't done that yet, right? You haven't, and so that it's hard. But hopefully in most normal circumstances, you've had that opportunity, and the well is, the well's not dry. You've built it up. I think it goes back to values and culture, and it's really important to make sure that in the toughest of times, you're still living your values. You might have to sometimes change your culture a little bit and change the behaviors you do to bring those values to life. But it's really important that you're consistent in the values and you don't abandon them when things get tough. And I'll give you an example. It's great to go and say, we're going to have Friday morning meetings, and the leadership team is going to come together, and we're going to talk strategy or talk opportunity or talk about things. And then all of a sudden, you know what? You experience something fairly catastrophic. You lose a big deal, your business shrinks, you've got to lay people off, you've got to whatever the challenge is. And there's a lot of businesses that the minute that happens, or leaders, that they cocoon, they're embarrassed, right? Maybe they were, they don't know how to handle it, and they end up cocooning with 1 or 2 of their trusted lieutenants, and it becomes command and control. But wait, didn't we say we had a value of transparency? Didn't we say we have a value of collaboration? Didn't we say we had a value of openness? So I think you've got to, those values get tested during the most difficult times. And I think you've got to be very deliberate about how are we living those values, and what are the behaviors we're bringing to bring those to life. And I think if you start there, and with that some openness, and you talk about resilience, I think that's a starting point.
Well, I had several comments about, really loved your observation about the meaningfulness of life and how that is expressed and experienced through resiliency and through challenging ourselves. And what I love what you're talking about as well is that and it feeds so nicely into, just beautifully into, the research around resilience. Well, what is resilience? It's a muscle. It's something to be exercised. And then so when we are continuing to, as you say, push the envelope, stretch ourselves, challenge ourselves, look to provoke change. Well, what does that do? It gives us more of an opportunity to build that muscle. And I think that's so powerful because, as you say, if we cocoon off and either, with certain people and stay in that space and not broaden our perspective on things and or not pursue growth opportunities, well, now invariably we are not allowing ourselves, not providing us with a wonderful chance to continue to build that resilience muscle. So I think that's such a awesome observation around this. So time has flown by. We've got a little less than 10 minutes left. So, and have a couple of questions to get to
Sure.
that people have asked. So would love to. Someone had noted, and it triggered them in terms of where you started with. You talked about failure and openness to failure, and that's going to happen. So just love that discussion of resilience. So wanted to hear from you, Alim, about, so how do you build a culture where people are more comfortable with setbacks?
Yeah, it's interesting. I know there's a popular narrative like, hey, it's okay to fail, and everything. And I think, look, you do have to give yourself permission to take risks. You do have to, when you have a setback, pick yourself up, learn from it, move forward, not create false narratives in your head. I don't know if I love this narrative where it's okay to fail. I think when you do things, you need to charge ahead. You need to make decisions. You need to make the best decisions you can. You have to be comfortable with an acceptable level of risk. It's a continuum. I think sometimes, maybe I've heard it less recently, but in the past 10 years, you'd have people almost brag about their failures. I think it is about pivoting, achieving success, realizing there's going to be setbacks, having resilience, about them, learning from everything you do, successes, challenges, setbacks, failures, and then being very, very honest with yourself. Why did we fail? Sometimes, you can emotionally hijack yourself by saying, we failed, I'm a failure. That's not constructive. Why did we fail? What did we do wrong? And sometimes that takes deep introspection, and learning from it and moving forward, to help you get to success.
Awesome, absolutely love that. And again, broadening our perspective on things, such a key theme. I have one more question. Maybe we'll get through another one, but this is great. The question was, so I'm currently in an organization and have been contemplating going out on my own, doing my own thing, starting my own business. Admire what you've accomplished. So any advice for people who are looking to found a business these days, and some key lessons so that you can share so they can learn from what you've done and really admire the success that you've had?
So many thoughts, and without knowing the individual circumstance, because I would answer that question differently if the person was 23 years old and single, living at home with no expenses, versus I'm 50 years old and I've got 4 kids in university and a massive mortgage, and I make a gazillion dollars a year in my job. Because I think there's different different sensitivities and different different time horizons and so forth. I think but I think fundamentally, any business you build, you have to really sit down and ask yourself, what is the value I'm going to bring to the market, and what is it that I have to offer the market, and define your market, that I'm going to do better, faster, cheaper, or with more value. And that doesn't have to mean you're going to create the next Microsoft or Google. It could be it could be in the neighborhood that I serve, there's not a pizza joint, and it's it takes 35 minutes for people to order pizza. If I open in this location, I can make great pizza and get it to them in 15. That might be a good thesis. It doesn't have to be something grand and world changing, but you have to really, really sit down and, I think, at least have a good hypothesis and thesis of what's the real value that we can that I can generate, and then actually being pragmatic about it. Okay, if that goes well, what revenue will it generate? What profit will it generate? How does that tie into my you know, to my lifestyle? I think as I've gotten older, I love entrepreneurs. I think the bar for me to justify starting a business, the questions I ask are a lot more, you know, are a lot more rigorous. Partly because where I am in life, partly because of the aspirations and the scale of what I'd want to do and the time frame. I think when you're younger, you should still ask those questions, but there is something about going out there and starting to do something.
Right.
Even if you're wrong, you create a reality. So, you know, you drop a stone in water, it creates ripples. You know, so when you're young, we said this when we did Infusion. I remember very consciously being like, well, you know what, if it doesn't work out, you know, we'll go, worst case, we'll go get a job and we'll have had some good work experience that'll have helped us. And so I think when you're younger, you can go through and have that exploration and be a little less firm in what you're planning. I think when you're a little bit older, you need to be a little bit more crisp around that.
Well, and what I love what you've shared, and it's that continuous theme of curiosity, and ask and honest appraisal in terms of, okay, so what am I doing, and why am I doing it? What impact am I going to have? And then, as you say, be pragmatic about, so okay, how am I going to turn this into reality? So thank you. Got a request saying thank you. This is an awesome questions to reflect on. So we're basically, you know, again, I'm so grateful, Alim, for your time and your insights. Just so many great questions, and I've learned so much through our discussions. Any final words that you want to share before we close the discussion today? As I said, thank you so much again. This has just been absolutely rich with so many insights on so many levels.
Geez, I don't know if I have any, you know, words of wisdom to leave by, but I'll just end by saying thank you, because I think that I've enjoyed the discussion equally, and sometimes just talking about ideas like this, it crystallizes thoughts and ideas, you know, for me. So this has been equally helpful, you know, for me as well. So appreciate the discussion and the opportunity, Craig.
No, the pleasure's all mine, and have admired your approach in terms of how you look at leading organizations, how you've grown organizations, and your emphasis on culture and continually questioning our assumptions, broadening our perspective, and love the comments you had today. As us as human beings in Canada and our role around the world and in society, and taking and challenging what we may believe, and inviting others into that, and other ideas into the fold. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. I will say this, just congratulations, Craig. Since when we first met, you were finishing your first book. I think you've got 2 out now, and I think you're also doing important work. I think the topic of leadership is really important. These discussions are important. The ideas are important. So thank you and congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate for me being able to be a part of facilitating this conversation is incredibly meaningful. Going back to one of the points that you made, and so it's been an absolute pleasure. Stay tuned, everyone, for the next webinar, and have an amazing rest of day and enjoy your weekend. Bye for now.